Whoa, oh, oh. La, 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 oh, oh. La, 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 oh, oh.
Hi everyone! We're now moving on to video number 4 in our holiday video series. We've only got 2 more to go till our last one on Christmas Eve. If you're new to this channel, I'm Wreath. Welcome! So today I thought I would do something a little out of my general comfort zone and attempt a 3D Christmas card. Now we're not going to get into anything too complicated, so don't be worried. If I can do it, so can you if you choose to try this project on your own. So let's just jump right into it. So for today's project I decided to do primarily just all watercolor. And the colors I'm using today are sap green and hooker's green and cerulean blue. Because I wanted the wreath to have more of a bluish tone than more of that yellowish green tone. I just thought that that would be a nice change for a wreath. And the brand that I'm using today is my Graham Watercolors, which I love. So the Graham Watercolors actually use honey as a binder. And I fell in love with using the Graham Watercolors when I took a workshop with Mary White, who's a very prominent and well-known watercolor artist. And she uses Graham, or at least she did at the time of the workshop, and that's what she recommended. And of course, if you know her work, it's amazing. If you haven't seen her work, I highly recommend you go and take a look because she is an amazing watercolor artist. So that's when I first started using them, and they have quickly become my top favorite watercolor in my palette. So when I first started this painting, I always tend to work in layers, and I think with watercolors that works best. Some people work very loose in watercolors, and sometimes I will too, but I tend to be a little bit more tight. So for my very first layer, I laid down a very light wash of the bluish green paint as a good foundation to work upon. Now once that first layer had dried, I was able to go back in and start working on details and giving the leaves depth and definition. So today I'm working on my Strathmore Mixed Media paper once again, even though I'm doing primarily 100% watercolor. I just like the control that I get with the Strathmore paper. Or if I was going to use a watercolor paper, I would use a hot press watercolor paper. Now, whether or not you are a hot press watercolor paper person or a cold pressed watercolor paper person, that comes down to completely personal preference. But for me personally, I just love the hot pressed. But today it's just Strathmore. So to get this bluish color, I primarily mixed my sap green with my cerulean blue. And that really mixed up a really nice greenish blue tone that I was looking for. So in order to get this leaf structure, the lines are basically just a long stroke. And I think that the leaves almost have like a eucalyptus type of a look to them. And it was just basically a process of layering and creating depth and building up those layers as I completed the actual depth and the volume of each leaf and making it look like they overlapped one on top of another as I went around. So I started working on my little dove. I think I probably should have looked a few reference photos before I dove right into this guy, but I actually just drew him from my imagination quickly. So he may not look really great to you, I'm not sure, but he's okay. He is very small, and that made him a little bit more of a taxing thing to do with a very tiny brush. But if you want to substitute something else or not even place a dove on your wreath, if you choose to do this, you don't have to. You can even put in a small birdhouse. And the only thing I would do is just maybe place a couple of leaves on the bottom of it, just like I did with him. So if you will notice, he kind of sits back into the wreath a bit. And I did that by flattening him out. You don't see his feet or anything. And he's just kind of nestled into a couple of leaves there on the bottom. but I wanted to give him a little extra touch, so I decided to make him the bird of peace. So I'm giving him a little olive branch, I guess is what that's supposed to be, that he's holding in his beak. So yeah, that's what that is. And what I did to give him volume with, even though he's completely white, I did paint him all white and gave him kind of a medium beige type of outline. I mixed up a bit of white and a touch of black to make a very light gray, so that it looks like his breast is slightly in the shadows. But full disclosure, I did use gouache on the bird himself. So today I used my Aqua Elite Princeton brush and my Raphael Kolinsky brush number 4, and the Aqua Elite was actually size 0, so that's how small of a brush I'm using here. So yeah, so if you are trying to get that kind of a line, that's what I did. Now next I decided to add a little bit of bling to my wreath. So I really like silver, especially when it comes to this bluish green tone. I really love the look of silver. So as an extra additional thing that I use above and beyond my watercolor and the little touch of gouache that I technically used on the dove, I'm using Pearlescent colors by FineTec, which I got off of Amazon. I got a set that contains a variation of golds and coppers and silver. So I will provide the link down below for that. It actually works pretty well on top of the watercolor. I was a little concerned. I thought I might need to actually put down a layer of gouache, but it actually worked its best just layering the silver paint straight on top of the watercolor. It was pretty opaque and not translucent at all. So now moving on to the beginning of what I would call the 3D portion of my design, I wanted to create a banner that would sit on top of my wreath. I just took a scrap piece of paper that I had and I laid it on top and I measured it for a general size that I wanted to actually have the banner be. And then I cut it down to that smaller size. I sketched out my general banner that I wanted to do, and I came up with what I wanted to say on the banner, which is peace, love, and joy. And I cut it just using my X-Acto knife and my small cutting board. So now on to the safety portion of this video, is that I want to tell you to be very, very careful if you're going to do this project, because this portion of the project includes a lot of cutting with an X-Acto knife, which is really the only way to get the detail that you will need to do if you choose to do this project. Cutting it with a pair of scissors will be very difficult to do. So the way that you use an X-Acto knife is that you always place your hand on top of the object and you use a sharp blade and you carefully cut your paper. So if you think the paper that you're going to use might be difficult to cut, just get yourself a sample piece and give it a test before you try this on your project. But cutting the Strathmore Mixed Media paper worked very easy for me personally, and I only needed to do one cut. It wasn't too difficult to do. But just be very careful moving forward. So as you can see, I just carefully went around my wreath once I got done with the banner. I created a few small cutouts where leaves might be indicated, and then I went back and I cut inside the wreath to create my various layers. So for some reason I failed to capture myself actually painting my banner, but I used my Tombow pen to go over the letters that I wanted to put on it. So now I want to discuss how I create a height to each of my images. So I had planned on using some white foam core, but when it came down to it, I realized I didn't have what I needed. So if you're going to do this project for a gift to someone, if you're actually making it as a card for someone, I would say get your materials in order. You could probably just go to the dollar store. You don't have to get a thick foam core, just a thin foam core with a little tiny amount of height to it. But because I didn't have foam core, what I did was I used one of my old Amazon boxes that I had laying around. So I just took a pair of scissors and cut off a small piece that I could use, and then just broke it down into little pieces. I wanted each layer to have a little bit of height. So I cut them big enough so that they provided support, but not so big that they could be seen at an angle. And that's why I feel like the white foam core would work best. But since I'm doing this for a sample, you really can't even see it here, so that's what I did. So for the purpose of my tutorial, I just used a glue stick to glue my pieces down. But especially if you're going to give it away, you might want to use something a little bit more substantial. You might even consider something like a neutral pH adhesive. Lineco makes a really good adhesive. And that way your piece will have an archival quality to it moving forward. So once I constructed my project and put it all together and inspected my work, I wanted to go back and do a few final touch-ups, and that's what you're seeing here. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with how my project turned out, considering this is pretty much my first 3D somewhat effect card. I think it came together really well. I think as a piece, it makes an elegant statement. Technically, it could be used either as a card that you're giving away or for yourself, or you could actually use it for wall art. So in wrapping this little painting up, even the little dove deserved a few final touches on his beak and his eyes, and in the details of the leaf of the little branch he's holding. I really love how it looks when you pick it up and you can see the shine from the silver bulbs, and I think the 3D effect just gives it a whole special touch. Well, that pretty much wraps up the video today, guys. I hope that you liked it. If you did, please hit like. Consider subscribing to the channel. I have 2 more holiday videos coming out, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, and then we're moving on to other fun, exciting projects. So I hope that you are all having a beautiful and blessed holiday season, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.